give us money. You know, why do we have a football team that is giving kids traumatic brain injury, and we're taking money away from arts education to fund these dudes who are just gonna like be date rapists? You know, like why not, take that money and fund arts education, which doesn't cause traumatic brain injury, which actually does encourage, neurological development and increases test scores.
Yeah. Well, you definitely are on our page in terms of the work that we're doing. I think that in terms of music education advocacy, we fund a lot of research that you've talked about. We fund it, and we do take it to Capitol Hill, we take it to school boards and whatnot. And sometimes I wonder, all that research is really, really valid. And it's kind of a sign of our times that we have to even bring the research forward, because ultimately this is a cultural heritage. It is a human heritage. We are all filled with music. So, but we have to do this work of advocacy. We have to convince and help people make the right decisions.
Well, I started working about 12 years ago with this organization in New York called the Institute for Music and Neurologic Function. It was started by Dr. Connie Tomato and Oliver Sacks. And it's a music therapy organization, but really what they focused on is documented evidence showing that music is one of the most powerful healing modalities on the planet. Which sounds like cliched hippie talk, but it's true. Like that's what, and so you can't just dismiss it and say like, hippie, go eat granola and smoke pot. You can say, no, look, we've just spent, it's legal. They've just spent 20 years doing MRIs and blood work and gathering all this data saying that music is such a remarkable force for healing. And not just because we say so, but because it is. Documented objective fact that music is one of the most powerful healing modalities on the planet, and we sort of give it short shrift because it's everywhere.
Let's hope that all this new data, new research, and that wonderful work of Connie Tomato, respect so much, will lead us to this new era, right? Where music is really considered to be part of the formula for wellness, healing, life, a good life.
Yeah,
right?
And where I don't know if this is relevant to what you guys want to talk about at all, but it's this idea of like trusting our own experience, because traditionally we outsource our well-being to experts. We're like, oh, well, for healing to be legitimate, it has to come from a doctor. For spirituality to be legitimate, it has to come from a priest or something. The truth is, like, so much of our individual experience has such legitimacy and such amazing power to heal, and now we're actually able to sort of like say that that is in fact objectively true.
I think you just told us a lot about your music by saying that.
I did.
Don't you think? I mean, isn't that your musical process, which I want to spend a little time on. But before I do, what was the moment when you kind of knew music was it? Was it about that punk rock moment in your early teen years, or were you sucked in? It was just a flow that you just went with?
I think that's a good question. I was 3 years old, and I was in the car with my mom, and Proud Mary by Creedence Clearwater Revival came on, and I refused to get out of the car until the song ended.
Wow.
And I think at that moment, my mom knew at some point I would become part of a 12-step organization. And also that I would spend my entire life working on music. Because literally, I love so many different things, so many different art forms, but nothing has ever affected me as powerfully as music does.
Have we all kind of nod our heads about that? Have you all had a moment? I mean, there's some time, right? I mean, there's just, I can relate in my own life but I don't talk about them, I'm talking about them now, but I don't talk, it's almost like a mystical kind of thing. And I do think, again, it goes to all the research that we now know. There are things that do happen, when all those, synapses, neurons fire on a spiritual, emotional way. I mean, it was kind of almost the ensemble that I was seeing was levitated in front of me when I was 9 years old. I mean, it was a sound, it was this and I think if we all had a support group about this, we all would probably reveal a lot more about that core moment when you couldn't get out of the car.
Yeah.
You know? You were immobilized by it.
And what's amazing is your music is so ubiquitous, and we all take for granted that it affects us powerfully. But ultimately, what's so amazing, it doesn't exist. Your music is technically just air molecules moving a little differently. You know, the compression and rarefaction that's hitting our inner ear, it's just a little bit different than a truck or me talking. You know, but yet music, which is just air moving a little differently, is played at, you know, baptisms and deaths, weddings, sports events. It makes people dance, it makes people have sex, it makes people get bad tattoos. It makes people, you know, like, it makes armies march into war. Like, so it affects people so powerfully, and it technically doesn't exist. Like, it's
made up.
Air molecule.
It's made up.
You know, and
we make it up.
That, I think, is one of the reasons why music has this amazing spiritual quality, is because there is no corporeal component to it.
It's temporal.
Yeah, and but we all just take it for granted. Like, you play your favorite song and it affects you so profoundly, but that's why we're all here. You know, because, I mean, this whole the hundreds of thousands of people who are going to come through here in the next couple of days, it's all because air has hit their ears a little bit differently. And that's it. All the technology, the billions and billions and billions of dollars, you know, 100,000 people in a sports stadium seeing the Rolling Stones or whomever. I was going to say Justin Bieber, but that seems to malign what we're talking about.
No.
So
all matters.
Yeah, and it's just so people like crying and dancing and celebrating and hugging each other because air is touching them differently. You know, it's amazing.
So, yeah, thank the man for great things. So let's talk about the first commercial success, which came quickly, right? Relatively quickly? Is that?
Depends, because when I was 14, I started playing in a punk rock band called the Vatican Commandos. And I'm not kidding, our first show, the audience was one dog. And I'm not exaggerating.
But we won't really put that in the commercial success category.
My friends and I in the band, we set up in my friend John's garage, and we invited a bunch of friends over. None of our friends came, and his dog Sparky came. And it was very memorable because afterwards we made spaghetti, and Sparky was this little terrier, and he jumped up on the table and swallowed an entire stick of butter. So I don't remember the show. All I remember
really inspired by
is
the
little Sparky, inspired by our punk rock, to swallow a stick of butter.
All right, so after that, then, I mean, talk about when you launched your first album and, you know, when things really started rolling.
Well, I played in punk rock bands in the 80s with no success. And then in the early 90s, I started making relatively obscure electronic dance music. And the first single I made sold 300 copies. Then the next single was a big success and sold 2,500 copies, which was, I was like, 2,500 people have bought a record that I made. And then the next single was this weird top 10 single that sold like over 1 million copies. And then the next couple of years were really good, but then it started, like the late 90s, things really went downhill.
Were you on a label in the early 90s then?
I was on
all done through, and we don't, you know, we have to be careful talking about the label.
Oh no, it's fine. So in the early 90s, I signed with this label called Instinct, and when I signed with them, they didn't have an office, a name, and they'd never released a record. And so my job was, I set up my studio in the guy who ran the label's living room. So I would make music and also like take records to FedEx and UPS and answer faxes and like clean the kitchen. So I was like the office boy, musician at the same time.
It's kind of, sounds like today in some ways, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, minus the faxes and UPS or whatever.
We've gone full circle in a certain way in terms of that. But 90s was kind of a breakthrough, the early 90s.
Sometimes it was like up and down and up and way down. And then my career in 98 had basically ended.
We don't see it that way.
Well, no, I put out an album called Animal Rights, which was this very difficult punk rock record. It sold nothing. It got 2 out of 10 stars in Rolling Stone. I went on tour And like, for example, we played a show in Paris, in a venue that held 150 people, sold 40 tickets. By the end of the show, there were 15 people in the audience.
Like Sparky. We're Sparky.
Yeah, it's like Sparky minus the stick above. And so after Animal Rights, I was like, okay, maybe I'll just make music in my spare time and go back. I'd been a philosophy major at school, and I was like, maybe I'll go back to school and get my doctorate and teach philosophy or become an architect. And then I put out this album, Play, which went on to sell like 10 some odd million copies.
But is it right that no label would pick up Play?
Oh yeah, we went to everyone.
And they all said no?
Because, and to their credit, they were right to say no. Meaning, I was basically like a has-been who made this lo-fi record where most of the vocals had been recorded 50 years ago. And this was the time of like the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Limp Bizkit. And I made this weird little record in my bedroom that really should never have been successful.
So, but it's interesting because when you say you had this, you know, I didn't know that it was 100,000 people and only 40 showed up.
No, 150 people, 40 showed up.
Okay.
At the end, literally 15 people were there.
Yeah, I mean, so, but we look back at all the things that you contributed and we don't, you know, all right, so it was commercially kind of not successful. But was it artistically successful?
Oh, I loved it.
Aha.
I mean,
that's why we don't look at that.
So if I had advice, my first piece of advice is don't learn how to do anything else. Like, be incapable of having a real job. And it will, your parents.
Okay, your parents.
I mean, yeah. But like, for example, my options were make music, teach philosophy at community college, or like, I don't know, clean up at Arby's. You know, career-wise, those are the only three paths I had open to me. So like when music wasn't working out, there were no other options. So I had to keep working at it. And the other is, and it seems really self-evident and naive, but just love what you do. You know, so like as a musician, I've been making music for a long time. My job is making music. When I'm not making music, I make music. You know, like if I'm in my studio working on music and I need to take a break, I go play guitar. You know, and when I want to take a break from that, I go listen to music. So love what you do and you will work every day at it, and it increases the chances that you'll become good at it and have success. And then the third is be as open-minded as possible. Like, have good, like, sort of safeguards. Like, don't respond, but be open to what people say. Because, like, I've gotten some of the best feedback from non-experts. You know, like,
just talking about the music, just
like,
reflecting on it, giving
yeah.
you just honest feedback.
Yeah, the way someone responds to music emotionally is so much better than the way that someone responds to it academically or professionally. So that's my advice.